I thought I'd do something slightly different today. And so I'd like to share some thoughts with you. As you go through this, please understand I do not have a monopoly on truth. I'm merely a humble astrologer. So please take what resonates and leave the rest. But I hope it will provide some food for thought for you, because many people, including myself, have been talking about New Earth a great deal recently. But we can't really have New Earth without a new consciousness and therefore a new human. So what I'm going to be talking about in this video is I'm going to start really with looking at New Earth and the astrological support for that, and then move gradually more into the new human and what evidence and support we have for that, because the two are most obviously linked. So I'm going to talk about where we are today, look at some of the very big and important transits for 25, 26, 27. And I will be only showing one chart in this, so it's much more of a talk than showing lots of astrological information. But if we look at big cycles, we look at really big cycles, for instance, the Kali Yuga cycle, all of those cycles in total represent 25,800 years, very close to the precessional cycle. And we appear to be now at the end of the Yuga cycle. And this is the cycle of darkness, where our consciousness drops to the lowest level. And several people are talking about this. The most recent that I've read is share this book with you called Yuga Shift, by the very scholarly Bibhu Dev Misra. Bibhu Dev Misra, I'll put his name below. And this book was recommended to me by my good friend Heather Ensworth, who is actually interviewing Bibhu in the next little while, because he's put together a very, very convincing academic study, very mathematical and astronomical, that he believes that technically the Yuga cycle, this age of darkness, will end in March 2025. That is literally 5 months, 6 months away from where we are now. So that's a 25,800 year cycle in total. We know, as I've mentioned many times, and so have other people, that the Earth is moving through an area of space called the photon belt. It only does that every 12,000 years, give or take 500. This is very high frequency, concentrated, kind of diamond sparkly light that is helping our evolution. So that's about a 12,000 year cycle. We know also that we are at the peak of solar cycle 25 right now. That's only an 11-year cycle. These are 11-year solar cycles that kind of just roll on one from the other. But already it is twice as strong as we believed it would be. The sun is extremely active right now. You can follow solar flares on spaceweather.com. You can get an app on your phone, but I think already where we are, I'm filming this on the 12th of October, and in the first kind of 9-10 days of October, I think we'd had 5 X-class flares, which is pretty extraordinary. So very high level of solar activity, and that in turn provides other very strong ingredients for our evolution. It affects our DNA. We also have some very significant changes in the Earth's magnetic and gravitational fields. And I don't know the time cycle that this is related to be honest, but it's very large. We're aware that the magnetic field of the Earth has dropped somewhat. And listening to Greg Braden, who's originally a geologist, and also Cryon, who's been saying this for some years, they are both saying that what is one of the principal causes of these changes in the magnetic field of the Earth and the gravitational field is that the core of the Earth, the iron and nickel core, is spinning at a slower speed than the crust of the Earth. And you can track them down online where they're saying that, and that's causing these changes. And where we have a reduction in the magnetic and gravitational fields of the Earth, and by the way, the gravitational field reducing is very much signaled astrologically by Saturn in Pisces, Saturn gravity, Pisces dissolving. there is an inverse relationship with those and our consciousness. And as evidence for that, in the space program, when astronauts left the Earth's magnetic and gravitational fields, they started to become much more psychically sensitive. Many of them had great epiphanies. I mean, one of the key people that comes to mind is Edgar Mitchell, who had such big experiences that he started up the organization called IONS, IONS, which is still going. It operates out of America, all about the study of parapsychology, spiritual matters, etc. So there does seem to be this inverse relationship, and I think that's part of the reason that many of us are rapidly starting to feel this accelerated psychic sensitivity. We're becoming more telepathic. Our dreams are getting more vivid. I mean, many, many people are experiencing this. And also that's signaled by Saturn and Neptune in Pisces. Neptune is the ruler of Pisces. It's increasing our psychic sensitivity, particularly as it moves to the last few degrees of the sign. And Saturn, again, is in Pisces, is about our density being dissolved in Pisces. And so both of those together, and they're co-present, they're not conjunct yet, they will be next year. They're co-present, they're both signaling that. But it's also these changes in the cosmology that I'm talking about that I think are playing a part in our increased psychic sensitivity. The other thing that is contributing to that is, again, and Greg Braden and again Cryon have both been speaking about this, is that apparently 200,000 years ago, two of our chromosomes were spliced together, chromosome 2 and chromosome 7. I've talked about this in videos, to leave us with 23 chromosomes. And it is only now that our 24th chromosome, which is linked to our multidimensionality, our psychic sensitivity, our expanded consciousness, is now coming back online. So we have these huge cycles of 200,000 years, 25,800 years, 12,000 years, 11 years, solar cycles. You know, we have these very big cycles of time that all seem to be converging together around this time, and we haven't even got to the astrology yet. So there's this convergence of small cycles and large cycles at this time, and it's as if we as humanity have a time capsule or a template inside us, just like the acorn or the caterpillar, that at some point in time these time capsules are activated for us to become the oak tree or the butterfly. And then there is no going back. That process of transformation is unstoppable. The oak tree doesn't cram back into becoming the acorn. The butterfly doesn't cram back into becoming the caterpillar. It's a one-way process of transformation. And this is what I profoundly believe we are in the process of entering. You know, we're in process now. This has begun. And it's also signaled really by the astrology, because as many of you know, that we have all of the outer planets changing signs within the next 18 months. You know, it's quite remarkable mathematically, astronomically, that they're all changing sign from Saturn outwards to Pluto. So Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto are all changing signs in the next 18 months. And they're all moving from slow, heavy earth and water signs into air and fire. So if you think life is fast now, you ain't seen nothing yet. It's going to speed up incredibly quickly. And when you consider the lengths of the orbits of these planets, Saturn is relatively short, 29.5 years. Uranus is 84 years. Neptune is 165 years. Pluto is 248 years. So they're all converging together in this shift into air and fire. So what we're going to see, and of course I'll be talking about this, as all astrologers will, in much more detail in the coming couple of years, there are going to be huge innovations in science and technology, in aviation. I was just reading today that apparently electric planes are being developed. By 2040, I think the article said that all planes will be electric. Well, Uranus is the planet linked to aviation and electricity. It rules Aquarius. Pluto on the 19th of November this year moves into Aquarius, so it intensifies and catalyzes everything that sign is about. So here we have very clear astrological signature for aviation changing radically, becoming much faster, becoming more electrified, perhaps. And this is I literally read the article today. So genetics, plasma physics, I mean, it just so many very rapid quantum leaps, innovations, particularly in science, technology, healing technologies, medicines, etc. Because next year Neptune will be spending really a fair amount of time at the final degree of Pisces, the anaretic degree, particularly the first part of 2025 and the end part and into early 2026 until it shifts into Aries fully in February 2026. But that last degree, and it's also partly because of that lunar eclipse on the 18th of September, we had in Pisces conjunct Neptune that still will operate its energy for some time. I believe we are sadly going to see a lot more flooding. I believe we're going to see rise in sea levels and also together with some different astrological symbolism linked to Haumea, who I'm going to be talking about in a moment. I believe we are going to start to see land masses emerging from the sea. They will have very fertile soil on them with new plant species, etc. And I actually believe they will represent literally new Earth, fertile new Earth. But we are going to see these very big Earth shifts in a way that we have not seen, I think, in our lifetimes, and more extreme weather, because the other thing that signals that, as well as Neptune linked to waters and seas and flooding and toxicity of water, etc., is for a lot of next year as well. Uranus is going to be at 29 degrees of Taurus. Again, this final crisis anaretic degree of Taurus. So Uranus is the planet linked to seismic activity, earthquakes, land masses emerging. And also it's the planet linked to high winds and storms as well. And I think particularly while it's in Taurus, which is linked to the earth, we are likely to see those. So these extreme weather events are partly linked to natural cycles and partly unnatural. I mean, frankly, just the very fact that the Earth is more electrified than it has ever been because of satellites up there, EMFs, that is electrifying all of the fields around the Earth, and because everything is connected and all of our Wi-Fi, etc., we've got electrification on many levels. To a degree we have never ever had before. That's contributing to the instability of weather systems, as well as all the other things I'm sure you're aware of. So I am seeing that. I am seeing that as part of the picture, and pleased with this as far as you are able. Obviously, if you're caught up in extreme weather events, it can be very scary. And what we have to do as humanity, as we've been doing in the last week or so, with those extreme, I mean, we've had extreme flooding in obviously North Carolina, in Florida. It's happened a little while back at the time of the lunar eclipse in Central and Eastern Europe. Poland was declared. The whole country was declared a national emergency. More recently, it's been France and Belgium. It's been the South Island of New Zealand. It's been Bosnia. It's been Nepal. I mean, many, many, many countries have suffered from this. And I think the best thing we can do, and it's part of our mastery, I think, as humanity coming together and really understanding our co-creative abilities, is when we're aware of these extreme events, we come together, which is what I suggested on social media. And we just focus love and a calming, think of a calming kind of pale blue color with everything turbulent, just get the winds calming down, the storms calming down, the flooding abating, gentle, 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 calming down. And so let us understand, if we're not hit directly personally by these extreme events, let us step into that co-creative power to come together with others and say, okay, what can we do energetically? We're going to learn the ropes. We're going to learn the ropes of being co-creators with energy, and also come together with immense compassion. That's part of Neptune in these last few degrees of Pisces. We are going to come together as humanity with great, great compassion, and that's going to help us step into unity consciousness as humanity in a bigger way. So I'm often asked about this, so I'm going to kind of declare that personally, yes, I do feel that there are two very broad timelines operating. I mean, there are an infinite number of timelines at the end of the day, but I believe there are two broad collective timelines. One is based on fear, and the other is based on love. If you're in fear, you tend to be kind of, following along the mainstream, and that is more technological, it's more synthetic, and it tends to give energetic life support to the old system, which I can see astrologically is absolutely crumbling. And question mark, is it the best thing for humanity? Whereas if you can stay in love for the majority of the time, and joy and gratitude and compassion and peace, that is feeding a very different timeline of new earth. And I've talked about this many times, and so have many other people. But really be aware, in every moment, you are either feeding life support of the old system, which with Pluto moving out of Capricorn in the next few weeks, is on its way out, or you are feeding a much more loving, abundant, and joyful new earth. So just be aware of that. So over next year, we are going to be having some very significant shifts. We have 5 planets crossing the world axis, which is 0 degrees of the cardinal signs. And in particular, we have Saturn and Neptune beginning their transit over 0 degrees of Aries. Now, Saturn and Neptune come together pretty reliably in conjunction every 36 years, but it doesn't happen at 0 degrees of Aries. That is the creator degree, as I call it, the initiatory degree, the very first degree of the zodiac. So they're going to start to do that next year. And that's a super important conjunction that all astrologers are going to be talking about for the next 2 years. They don't come together exactly to the minute, but they do to the degree. They come together exactly to the degree and minute in February 2026, and then they move on through Aries. Now, there are many themes coming from that. I personally want to focus on some of the more positives, which is making real the dream. Saturn making real, Neptune the dream. Stepping into our spiritual leadership, mastery, Saturn, spiritual, Neptune. Stepping into our spiritual sovereignty, becoming the creator of our reality in a much bigger way. So that's going to be a huge transit that's starting to happen next year and fully is exact in February 2026. Manwë is one of the very important dwarf planets for New Earth. He was, with his wife Vada, he was part of the creation myth, said to create the cosmos. He's the highest archangel, closest to the mind of God, highest intelligence, and one of his great big themes is the triumph of light over dark. It's very interesting that at the Capricorn solstice this year, 21st of December, he is conjunct the North Node, and he is also the very powerful position exactly at the Capricorn solstice, conjunct the North Node. That's at 2 degrees of Aries, so that's also on the world axis. So we have a lot going on, and as you know from all the updates that I've talked about recently, we have many of the dwarf planets coming into very powerful geometry with each other. And because, apart from one that we have a lot of information on, Sedna, that I'm going to be talking about in a moment, that has an 11,400-year orbit. The other dwarf planets and Kuiper belt objects have around a 300-year orbit. And so when they come into powerful geometry, conjunctions, squares, oppositions, they stay in that geometry for at least 2 or 3 years because they're all moving at the same pace. I'm sure you kind of understand me. So, but another thing I want to say before we move into those is just to highlight that we already have a technical trine between Uranus and Pluto. It's already operational because Uranus it's out of, well, it's in sign at the moment actually, because Pluto is still, as I speak, on the 12th of October at the very last degree of Capricorn, an earth sign, and Uranus is around 26 degrees of Taurus, an earth sign. So they are in conjunction. Even when they both move into their next sign, for Pluto, that's Aquarius on the 19th of November for the next 20 years. For Uranus, it moves into Gemini starting next year in July. You can see that they are still in a tighter trine from the first 0, 1 degree of Aquarius, 0, 1 degree of Gemini. So that's very powerful. Now, the seed point for that trine was when those two planets came together. So this is true, Sun and Moon come together every month. That's the seed point that's the new moon every month. But every pair of planets does this. So for Pluto and Uranus, they came together in the 1960s. That was the seed point for what we are going to start to see manifest, particularly anytime from now on, but particularly 2026 to 2028, there are 5 exact trines, very positive aspect, 120 degrees, between Uranus and Pluto. So what was happening in the 1960s? Some of you lived through this, or certainly you're aware of it. That was the time of the hippies. Incredibly creative blossoming of music and art and poetry, an amazing time to live through. But they were promoting peace. Peace and love was their motto. They were anti-war. They wanted to come together and live in communities and collaborate and, love each other. Very interesting, isn't it? That was the seed point. And with the trines between Uranus and Pluto that are already operational, 5 of them will be exact between 26 and 28. And that will be the manifestation point of that seed point in the 1960s. So I think that is really, really positive. Now, in 2025, that is going to be an incredibly dynamic and incredibly eventful year, even more so than 2024. We have a lot happening, and I'll be talking about 2025 later this year. I'm doing a joint session with my good friend Kathy Rose in December, and there will be a lot to say, partly because all of these outer planets are changing signs, literally within the next 18 months. And because so many of the Kuiper belt objects, the dwarf planets, are coming into their own very powerful geometry, remember that they are a higher octave of consciousness for us. They are alive with spirit. They connect us to the divine. They connect us back to our ancient roots and our, ancient shamanic connection with the earth. So many of them are creator gods with that instinctive connection back to nature, the natural patterns, the earth, which we have really lost in our modern world. I'm going to put a link below to a video, it's about an hour and a half long, which I found incredibly inspiring, which I suggest you watch when you've got some time. And the lady being interviewed there just has such wisdom. And the video is called Ancient Futures. And that to me very much represents the Kuiper belt objects and the dwarf planets. That's where we're going. We're going back to the ancient remembrance of the magic of that connection, which we've lost living in cities and not growing our own food and buying in supermarkets and having this disconnection from nature and from each other. And she speaks so wisely about this is what we need to go back to, and I personally believe that we are going back to. Okay, so let me now share the only chart I'm going to be sharing in this video, which is here. And I've just really pared this down to the bare bones of what I want to talk about. So this is for today, and all I'm going to talk about here are these 3 points. Pluto, 29 degrees 38 of Capricorn. It is stationary. That's what the S is about there, 12th of October. It is stationary direct today. It's going to start moving direct from now on, and that is going to start a very, different feeling of energy. We are moving out of the old world, the old systems now. There is no going back to the old ways of Capricorn, because it's not going to be in Capricorn again for around another 230, 235 years. Pluto is in a square to Haumea, dwarf planet Haumea, which is at 1 degree of Scorpio. You could see it more clearly once Pluto just tips into Aquarius, because then it won't be an out of sign square, it will be an in sign square. And Haumea is in a quincunx, 150 degree aspect to Sedna, which is at 1 degree of Gemini, and Sedna is in trine to Pluto. So that's all, pretty much all I want to talk about on this chart, but I want to talk about it in some detail without all the other charts the other planets cluttering it. Okay, so Pluto, as you will know, many of you know, is the symbol of death, transformation, and rebirth. And an analogy I often use is a tree dying in a wood, falling, rotting down. So it's a transformation to form new soil to ultimately give new life. That is a death, transformation, and rebirth symbol of Pluto. But it's something we've all witnessed, and it's linear, if you like. It's a linear transformation process that we can all understand, we've all seen. Haumea, and I've talked about Haumea many times, but Haumea is the link to the Hawaiian goddess of fertility. She is able to birth babies from all over her body, not just the normal places. So she's an incredibly powerful symbol of regeneration, a very strong symbol for new earth. In her fire goddess aspect, she was also said to birth the 8 islands of Hawaii, which is why I think we are going to see more land masses re-emerging, because she is in such powerful geometry to Pluto and Sedna right now. And I'm going to talk about how long this configuration will last in a moment. She also, in the third aspect of her symbolism, her partner had taken some wild bananas from the island that they were living on. And because there was a very autocratic ruler ruling at the time, he said that only the elites could have first pickings of the food, and then what was left could go to the peasant people. And he was going to put Haumea's partner to death. And Haumea remarkably summoned together her community, summoned in her spiritual help, and somehow she managed to overcome the autocratic ruler through the use of spirituality, energy, and community. And I think they're great lessons, again, in Haumea's symbolism for us going forwards. So those are the 3 aspects of her symbolism. So she's very linked to new land, regeneration. Also, she's very linked to longevity and turning our age back. So I know many of you will welcome hearing that. And I do actually believe when we get through this rather lumpy period we're going to be going through over the next few months, that we are going to live longer, we are going to be healthier. And even Zach, who was channeled by my good friend Jack Trelaw, he's an aspect of Dwal Kul, the Ascended Master. He has said that degeneration will cease, that we will be much healthier. So it's another little reinforcement of Haumea symbolism. Now, Pluto has a 248-year orbit, as I mentioned. Haumea has a 283-year orbit. So not that much longer than Pluto. However, Sedna has an 11,400-year orbit. Now, Sedna, and again, I've explained her symbolism, but for those of you who haven't heard it before, there's some variations on the myth, but essentially, Sedna lived in the Arctic regions. She ended up being married, as I said, some variations, but the core of the myth was she ended up being married off to a very unsuitable man by her father for an exchange of riches. The husband betrayed all his promises. He was extremely unsuitable. So Sedna begged her father to come and rescue her. So he came in a canoe. A big storm blew up. Here again, we have a reference to big storms, big weather. In order to save himself, he threw Sedna over the edge of the canoe. He threw her off the canoe. And when she tried to hold on with her fingers, he chopped off her fingers. And so she floated down to the deep. She drowned, but her fingers each became beautiful new sea creatures, of turtles and whales and dolphins and beautiful sea creatures. This wasn't just a transformation, as we see with Pluto, or a regeneration in a bigger sense with Haumea. This was a metamorphosis, a complete change of state for Sedna to become new creatures, seals, turtles, whales, dolphins. A metamorphosis is a jump of state, a total change of state. And this is the point I really want to make here. And so she went, so there are parts of the myth here about obviously betrayal of the patriarchy, husband and father, not coming very well out of that myth. She was trying to hang on to what represented the old forms of security, something tangible, the canoe, the kayak, and that failed her. She was forced to surrender to the deep, to the forces of nature, and yet she was birthed into something beautiful and very high dimensional. As you probably know, dolphins and whales are very high dimensional. Okay, so there's a new biology linked to this. With this metamorphosis, there's a new biology. And this configuration that I'm sharing here really is tight because of the different speeds of these orbiting bodies for 2025 and 2026, but is then starting to move on in 2027. Okay, and that's why I really want to focus on just these three. So 2025, the square, the trine, the quincunx, they are all in position through 2025 and 2026, but they're then starting to move on in 2027. What is also interesting is that another aspect of the myth of Sedna is that she went from being a victim, betrayed by her husband, betrayed by her father, thrown out of the canoe, she had to just surrender, to now being an authority, to stepping into her sovereignty. She's now the Inuit goddess of the deep oceans. And sailors have to request safe passage from the goddess Sedna. And if they don't request safe passage, they can run into trouble. For instance, it was very interesting last June, I think it was June 18th, Sedna changed from being in Taurus since I think 1966, made its first dip into Gemini. And that first week in Gemini, there was a small number of people, I think 5 people, went out in a submersible called the Titan to explore the wreck of the Titanic. And they did not ask for safe passage from Sedna. And they ran into great difficulty and they all drowned. Gemini is linked to the lungs. Very interesting. They all drowned. And so it's very important, connected to the mythology, that sailors ask for safe passage and that enough seafood is available for them to eat, etc. So she went from victim to sovereignty, victim to authority. So again, I think this is a very important part of what we're looking at. What is interesting also is that Uranus at 26 of Taurus is already operationally conjunct Sedna, because it's, 4 degrees or so away. It is going to reach Gemini starting in July next year, but it's getting closer and closer. Well, I think it goes direct, if I'm not mistaken, in January, and then gets closer and closer to Sedna, but it's already operationally conjunct. Remember, Uranus is also linked to high winds and storms too. When it gets closer to Sedna, Uranus, as you will know, is never linear. It's never gradual. It represents a quantum leap, a jump. And I believe this is a jump in state. It will activate, electrify, agitate this potential jump in state that Sedna already represents, this metamorphosis. Uranus will add fuel to that. It will give a quantum leap to that potential metamorphosis. And also, by the way, Sedna's orbit is highly elliptical and goes all the way out to the edge of our galaxy, to the Oort cloud. And when it comes closer to Earth, as it's doing right now, it will be at its closest point in 2075. And that might seem a long way away. It's a drop in the bucket when you've got an 11,400-year orbit. It is also bringing new information for us. Remember, we also today, within a week to either side of today, also have a Comet Atlas, coming very close to the Earth. And that will also bring in new information for us. So this is very interesting. One other thing to say about Haumea, and to credit Alan Clay, who runs Dwarf Planet University, he refers to Haumea as unity consciousness, a higher octave of Neptune representing unity consciousness. Now, many people have already spoken about our shift physically from carbon to crystalline. The very fact that Saturn is in Pisces, Saturn is linked to carbon, graphite, granite, density, weight, in Pisces, dissolution. The fact that the outer planets, particularly here I'm thinking Uranus and Pluto moving into air signs, that's becoming more crystalline. When Uranus comes to conjunct Sedna, apart from all the things I've talked about, I think that's going to be a huge leap in our multidimensionality, because Gemini rules consciousness. It rules its mutable air. There's a mutability here again. I think there's going to be a huge jump in expanded consciousness, in our communications ability, in the galactic connection, which will help us a lot, and in our multidimensionality. It's going to be a jump. It's also going to be a jump in AI. That's going to bring many benefits. And yes, it could bring challenges depending on the consciousness that's using it. And that's a whole separate topic. But we will have this potential jump. So let me stop sharing here, because I think this is an incredibly exciting time that we're going to move through. And, not to avoid the big Earth changes, because Gaia is going through her own upgrade as well, which is part of why we are going through this upgrade. We're all shifting together because everything is interconnected. So we are going to see more extreme earth changes. We are going to see more extreme weather. But that is really part of us learning to pull together, as I say, with great compassion and birthing a much bigger sense of unity consciousness. Now, all the things I've talked about so far are really at their strongest, as I'm seeing it astrologically, over the next 2 years, 2025 and 2026, and to some degree into 2027. I've talked about the outer planets all shifting signs within the next 18 months. What we just looked at there with Pluto, Haumea, and Sedna, it's really the next 2 years. And then it starts to pull away because Pluto is starting to pull away, then Haumea is starting to pull away from the configurations I've shared. So this is interesting, you know, if we're looking at pinpointing time, because as you will know, some people are talking about a great solar flash. I mean, Anne Tucker, who I respect a lot, Anne with an E, I've already had one recorded conversation with Anne, who has a weekly channel message from the angels. I'm going to be speaking to her again this coming week, indeed. And the angels over the last 2 or 3 years have become incredibly insistent, consistent, and specific and detailed about this great solar flash that we're going to move through. And they've talked about this, a period of darkness, a period of a cocoon or a chrysalis that we go into. But it's as I understand it from her messages, it's a period of days. And then we will emerge with a much higher consciousness. If you listen to the wonderful Alison double L COE, she is a QHHT practitioner in America. That's the Dolores Cannon deep hypnosis process. She, in the transcriptions, which she has on YouTube of many of her client sessions, the clients have reported this great white flash that changed everything. Other people I've listened to have talked about literally a split second of a great solar flash, literally a split second. And they've talked about an instantaneous dimensional shift, when we emerge with a much higher consciousness, and that changes everything. And that shift into that higher dimension will also clean the oceans, clean the toxicity, clean the all the toxicity from the land and the earth, and earth that's so perished it won't grow food. And I've always felt that, I've said it in several videos, this is not going to be a long slog of years. It's going to shift. So this is just my own personal sharing with you. Please take what resonates and ignore the rest. I do not have a monopoly on truth. I'm just finding that this is very interesting to share with you, because we're moving from talking about a new earth to starting to talk about a new biology here. It's a shift, and whether it's a split second or whether it's a period of days, we are talking about a very short period of time. But it seems to be happening when we have a lot of extreme earth events, and extreme weather. So I do believe that in this dimensional shift, yes, there could well be, on a different timeline, an old earth that continues, that still has all the challenges of pollution and toxicity, but all of us as humanity have the option, all of us will be given the opportunity to make that dimensional shift. Now, I know that Dr. Zach Bush has referred to the New Human. I know Lee Harris has written a book already called The New Human. That is channeled by his guides, the Z's. So that's very interesting. Lee Harris also really just in the last 2-3 weeks in his channelings has started to talk about the cosmic heart and cosmic love. And so this isn't a pink, fluffy, personal, romantic love. this is a much bigger kind of unifying love. And I think the closest we can get to it, if we think of Dr. David Hawkins' map of consciousness, he talks about love as a state of being. And I think that's how we can get some kind of understanding of this cosmic love that so many of us are going to be experiencing and moving into. You know, that's so exciting. So many ancient prophecies, as we know, talk about this time. The Hopi talk about the shift into the fifth world. The Mayans, we know, they talked about the end of the Mayan calendar in 2012, and that was one of the big steps in this period of evolution we're going through. The Quero Indians in the Andes talk about this period that we're shifting from the mind very much into the heart, and they talk about even that our our thinking and our language ability shifting to the heart, so that we will communicate between each other by energy, because we'll be able to read each other's energy. We'll read if anybody's being dishonest. We'll read if somebody's not well and be able to heal them. Telepathy, healing, or because we'll become much more light body, operating from our largest electromagnetic organ. And it's that heart that really communicates with the cosmos, because that's all electromagnetic out there too. And I've talked about that before. So as we shift into unity consciousness, again represented by the symbolism of Haumea, it will be impossible to have hunger, poverty, war. It will be impossible. If we're with somebody who's hungry, we will want to give them half our food. It will be impossible to hurt someone. It will be impossible to do all these things that have operated on a much, much, much lower frequency than we are moving to. And I hope you can feel a touch of this. I mean, I can absolutely feel this in my bones. And what I want to share with you now is some of the beautiful work of Richard Rudd, who I have huge respect and admiration for. I'm hoping to be speaking to Richard in the next couple of months, and that's going to be a fascinating discussion as well. He has, I understand he had this kind of mystical experience that lasted just a few days. I think it was in his late 20s, and he said he didn't get out of his pajamas, but it was a huge kind of download that really birthed the Gene Keys, this magnificent classic of our times. And it truly is extraordinary what came through in that download. And if you haven't explored the Gene Keys, and I personally know not a lot about them, but I'm going to start to explore them more, hopefully with Richard in that conversation. But it's fascinating. He talks about these times, particularly with regard to the 55th gene key, which is his evolutionary gene key, which I understand I have conjunct my natal moon, which is interesting that I'm talking about this with you. And he talks about this period as a shift from matter to spirit. He talks about this as the freedom gene key. And he talks about 1987, the harmonic resonance. He talks about 2012 as being the melodic resonance. And then he talks about this next phase. And I'll hold back the year for just a moment, because I want to talk about what he says about this 55th gene key. And if you haven't read it or heard it, I really recommend it. It is exquisite. It's visionary. It's truly visionary for where we are now. And he uses the analogy of the water nymph. And the water nymph has lived all of its life underwater. And one day it just decides this is the day it will climb up the stalk of grass to move above the water level. And within a few hours, it goes through a metamorphosis, not just a transformation, a metamorphosis into the butterfly. A complete change of state. And what enables the wings to expand in the dragonfly is that the water nymph pumps the water, primary evolutionary force, out of its body into the wings of the dragonfly to enable the wings to expand and the dragonfly to fly. And from that point on, as Richard says so poetically, it is then a creature of the air. And it never goes back to living in the water ever. Now it has freedom to fly to every scent and colour. It has complete freedom in a way that it never had before. And he talks about this period, this metamorphosis, being a spontaneous, his words, a spontaneous implosion of Siddhic consciousness. Beautiful, beautiful. He's such a poet. A spontaneous implosion of Siddhic consciousness. And the Siddhis were, this is an Indian term, as I understand, these are magical powers when you're very evolved. Magical powers that happen to yogis and, you know, very evolved people. But he says, and again, I'm using his words, this will be a complete restructuring of all vibrational life on our planet. Fascinating. And this is really a kind of solar galactic mutation that we're going to go through because of the light, because of this time capsule or this template that's being activated in us right now, just like the acorn, just like the caterpillar, just like the water nymph. Now, Richard, when he wrote the Gene Keys, he began to write them, as I understand, in 2002, and it took him, I believe, 7 years to write. But he was quoting 2027 when he believed this evolutionary leap would begin. And then, as he says, you know, nothing will ever be the same again, to quote him exactly, nothing will ever be the same again. Now, we are dealing with very tight timelines here, aren't we? Anywhere from end of 20, we're in, mid-October 24 into 2027. But what is also interesting to add into this mix, and, as I say, take this information lightly, I just think it's absolutely fascinating. Someone wrote to me recently, in the last week, in fact, somebody who has been following 108 spiritual visionaries, and they gave me a whole narrative of named these visionaries and gave them the kind of narrative of what they've been saying. And with these 108 visionaries, they were originally all saying it's going to be 2032. And indeed, we have a very big astrological happening in 2032 because we have Saturn conjunct Uranus that year. So that's a big deal. But they were all saying 2032 is when this big evolutionary shift will happen. Now, 44 of them, of the 108, so we're not far off half of them, are saying that we are already in this process that will have more traction from 2025 onwards. And that's a really big shift from 2025 onwards. So it'll be fascinating as and when I get to talk to Richard, whether he has any different view of 2027, but I'll, very much respect where he's at. I actually listened to a very beautiful talk of his in London about 2-3 weeks ago. Although he didn't mention the flash of light when as I understand it, when he wrote the Gene Keys, in the talk in London, which was organised by Alternatives, you can probably still buy it from alternatives.org, he talked about a very vivid dream with this, again, incredible flash of white light. Again, whoever mentions this flash of white light says it's very benevolent. It's not a burning, it's not a destructive flash of light. So, this is very fascinating, isn't it? I'm just sharing this with you because I feel as if I'm a bit out there sharing this information. So I hope you will take it in that light. So we've looked at the convergence of very, very big cycles and smaller cycles of time. We've looked at the convergence of what's happening with these astrological shifts in the next couple of years. Now we're in this, what I've just been talking about recently, we're talking about a convergence of experience that people are starting to talk about, a convergence of experience, where they're talking about the new human, the new biology. And that's what I find fascinating. And so many of them are talking of what they're really talking about. And I think this is what Richard was talking about, and what Anne Tucker is talking about in her beautiful messages, is a state of transcendence. That we are going to, if we wish to make this transition, we are moving potentially into a state of transcendence. And so we're moving more into the light body, where, as I say, we'll be able to read each other's energy. We'll eat less, we'll eat more plant-based, we'll eat much lighter. We might just eat every few days. We'll have a sense of oneness, we'll have a sense of unity consciousness. We'll have a much greater connection to the earth. Every action we take will be for the highest good of all and the highest good of the earth. Every action. We will have a connection to, much stronger connection to our galactic family, I believe, particularly after Uranus moves into Gemini, because it's literally Uranus, galactic, Gemini communication, contact. I believe that this cosmic love that Lee Harris is talking about, and both Zach, aspect of Dwell Cool, and Lee Harris both talking about this heart connection to the cosmos, I believe this is a kind of divine love or a Christ consciousness that we're starting to birth. And also, very interestingly, 3 people in the last 2 weeks, 3 people who presumably don't know each other, they're in different geographies, have written to me because they've had kind of downloads that we, in terms of the change of our biology, we are shifting from what we have known as our central nervous system, which is being pretty fried at the moment with all of these solar flares. I mean, many of us are experiencing, you have extreme fatigue or insomnia or tinnitus or aches and pains, because this assimilation is so rapid. But these 3 people have used the same words when they wrote to me. They've talked about a shift from a central nervous system, which is not up for the job, frankly, and that's why a lot of us are feeling very fried and stressed with our nervous system, a lot of, challenge and anxiety and panic, to a central harmonious system that is being birthed. And the beautiful words they all used were, this is going to take the form of gleaming human luminous threads that can hold higher octave frequencies. Gleaming luminous threads of this central harmonious system that can hold higher octave frequencies. I just find this so beautiful, and that's really why I wanted to share this with you in terms of this new biology, this new human that I believe we are moving to. And so I know you're all shouting at the screen. Okay, so when's this going to happen exactly? I can hear you shouting at the screen. Well, I don't know, because we are co-creating this. And astrology, as I've said many times, is not a language of 100% guarantee. It's a language of mathematical probability. But I believe the greatest probability, given what I've shared with you in this video, is the next 2 to 3 years. That's what I feel. Particularly because all those spiritual luminaries are also pulling the timeline right back to where we are. And I know, listening to local friends who are spiritual leaders too, they've also said we're kind of 30% ahead of where we were expected to be. So I don't know. I'm going to be looking at probability peaks in the next 2 to 3 years as I go through the updates. But we're going to be looking, I think, at a Uranian moment. This is electromagnetic. It's a Uranian moment. And it may well be either when Uranus is at the anoretic degree of Taurus, very last degree, or when it comes to shift into Gemini and conjunct Sedna very tightly. Sedna ain't going anywhere beyond that kind of 0-1 degree of Gemini for some time, because it has an 11,400 year orbit, and it will be in Gemini from now until, I believe 2067. It's going to stay in Gemini a long time. Okay, so that's my best guess. So what do we do about it? How can we prepare? By far the best thing we can do, or things we can do. Stay in love, stay in peace, stay in stillness, book more stillness meetings with yourself, drop into bliss. Ignore, please, 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 ignore the distractions, however interesting, fascinating, colorful, and dynamic they are. Stay with this rock solid core of your heart. This rock solid core of I know who I am, and I can just whoomph in seconds. I can come back to that stillness. And I'm going to put out that, I think, as a short video in the next day or so, that terribly, terribly simple yogic, the belly breath, the yogic belly breath. And I'll do it just as a short video because that's a great way of getting in touch with this inner core in your heart. Focus inwards and drop into the center of your heart like this. You have a pinpoint of light. I mean, the ancient Vedic scriptures talk about this. The Upanishads talk about this, that there's this pinpoint of light, which is the 0 point. It's the point of creation. This is where we create from. It's the point of bliss. And the more often you can do that in a day, the better. You know, drop back into this very simple breath work, this feeling of stillness and peace and love, and also connect to like-minded people as far as you're able, whether it's ideally in person or even online. Feel that you are coming together in community with other people, because these communities are going to get stronger. They're going to get stronger by necessity over the next 2 to 3 years. We are going to develop a stronger and stronger sense of unity consciousness, of coming together, of sharing, collaborating, helping. So many new solutions are being born quietly behind the scenes. Believe me, they are. They absolutely are. And you only hear about the noisy stuff. But I hope that this kind of meander and sharing of information, and yes, a lot of it is channeling, but I believe that from now on, more and more people are going to be adding information, either scientifically or spiritually, to what I've already shared about not only the new earth, but the new human, the new biology. We are going through an upgrade. And so I hope in the last little while you've been listening to this video, it has pinged something in your mind or in your heart, and given you some confidence that even though things may be a little rocky and lumpy as we go through Gaia's upgrade too, there is something very different that could happen just in a split second. And then things will never be the same again. It will literally be a huge dimensional shift, which is instant and a quantum leap, a metamorphosis for humanity. Hope that's helped. May have to turn the comments off for this one, I think, but God bless, and let us come together in these huge times and feel excited, feel love, feel peace, and know that where we are going is a better place through this rocky bit. God bless. Bye for now. I'll be back soon with a much more normal update.